listening to Preacher in the Hat Podcast. Lock us in and rip the knob off.
In today's episode of Preacher in the Hat, we are going to put the rules of church on trial. Before that, we're going to put something else on trial. And before that,
oh boy,
I'm going to roll through the introductions.
Can hardly wait.
Across from me, my brother Derek. To my right, not that matters to you directionally, is my dad Steve. And then, as always, Big Easy himself, Mr. Chris Sumter, behind the cameras and on a hot mic. Still yet to be on camera, even after our pleas last week. But like I said, we're going to put the rules of church on trial, and I'm looking forward to that. But first, like I mentioned, we got to put something else on trial. And so, boys, I got a taste test for you.
I figured.
Much to the dread of our audio-only listeners.
Much to the chagrin.
That's right.
Why can't we get one that hits right?
We'll see.
Thanks to the fellas at No Cap Soda Pop.
Hold it. Let me get that in there. There we go.
No cap.
No cap.
Big
No
bet.
cap.
No cap.
Big bet.
So,
Wow.
Yeah.
That really says that. Let me.
Yeah.
It really says.
It really
No
says.
Cap
It really is.
Soda Pop.
Is this
Derek-
like a new and upcoming company, or they've been around
yes,
for a while?
allegedly.
Okay.
So no artificial flavors, vegan, gluten-free, blah, 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 zero sugar, zero caffeine.
IPO coming soon.
Derek, who's the strawberry dream for tonight? Is that you?
Yeah. Go ahead and give that one to Dad. That one looks like a
All right.
strawberry dream.
We got to have some strawberry dream.
And the apple
So we
Riz.
do this like communion. We wait till everybody has a cup, or what?
I'll take me the apple Riz there.
Okay.
And I'm gonna take the tangy orange for myself.
That's
because I get to pick. And
I get the leftovers.
for Chris, I got the best flavor yet. It's bussin' berry.
Oh, nice.
Oh
Bussin'
man. Now he can be creative.
actually called Bussin' Berry.
So, fellas, keep those.
Shall we pop the top together?
Keep those can pops away from the mic a little bit. But yeah, go ahead.
Everybody's got a different one, so we're gonna need just give it a good 10 15 second recap.
Really,
See if you can let us know.
really small ingredients list, which I'm happy about.
That's a good thing. They call it next gen soda, right? I
Yes,
believe Eric is
they
what she
think
said.
they are the next gen soda. I do fear for them that their naming strategy, they're gonna have to hit big before Cap and No Cap goes out of style, which should be any day now.
Would be interesting to find out where the name came from.
No Cap. That's a saying.
Is it?
Cap basically means like lying. Like if you say, you never heard Chris say no cap, that means like I'm not lying.
Yeah.
Well,
So first of all, hats off to the people at No Cap, because we have taste tested drinks on here that didn't tasted nothing like they said it was going to be. But I've got apple Riz here, and it's actually kind of tasting like some apple. So
I'm not
This
even.
tastes like strawberry.
yeah.
I'm not even gonna lie to you right now. Tangy orange is pretty good.
Strawberry's not bad.
Apple, is not going to be my favorite drink, and I probably wouldn't get this again because I don't really want like an apple drink unless it's apple juice, in the morning, whatever. But I got to be honest with you, I'm all right with I'm all right with how that is going. I got me the.
How's the berry over there?
I think this would pair very nicely with some pork rinds.
That's a nice orange drink. I got to be honest. I'm going to be completely upfront. That's a nice orange drink.
The apple. Yeah, it's tough because it doesn't really taste like a juice, like apple juice, and that's kind of what you're hoping maybe be around. It tastes much more like it's a lot closer. It's a lot closer to like a sour apple Jolly Rancher.
Yeah.
Than it is like.
Oh, I would
really
like it
tasting
then
like
because I don't like anything sour.
It's not sour. I was just trying to describe
I
it.
see.
It's
I got
not
you.
sour.
Okay.
But yeah, I want that orange back.
Yeah, that one's better. The orange one.
I was going to say this taste test is going much better than
So shout out to the
Tennessee
guy. Oh, I looked him up. Shout out to the guys at No Cap Soda Pop. Sam and Vinny Wilson. I have no idea where y'all are from. You actually hit it right, I think.
They say it's distributed by No Cap Soda Pop LLC out of Corona, California. So,
Okay.
I'll tell you what I like about it,
well done, boys.
since you asked. One, sometimes you get these drinks that are trying to be healthier and take less sugar out, and it loses the flavor.
Yes, that's
And then sometimes all you have is like that sparkling mineral water
Yep.
that makes you almost vomit.
Yeah.
And this is not it. I'm not saying I'm going to go out and buy a pallet of this.
Oh, yeah, you won't.
I'm not
because
going to buy a pallet.
You
of it.
probably won't because a single can of that is like $2.30. So
Hey, don't let the
but at
clothes
least
fool
it's a
you.
16. At least it's a 16 ounce instead of a 12. So
Money is no object. You're
Yeah,
saying.
I mean, it's.
If you wanted to buy a
If I
pallet,
wanted to buy a pallet, I'd get two.
that's right.
But what I am saying is, I've seen drinks that they were trying to be like healthier, and they aired on the side of healthy.
Yeah.
And it's like you felt like you were just drinking bubbles. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
This is not the
100%.
case.
100%.
it's no calories, no sugar, no caffeine. That's probably the best. This is probably the best drink I've had that touts all of that.
And I don't certainly want to keep going on and on with this thing, but I will say this: I'm already starting to think about things that would pair well with this.
Oh boy,
Probably
he'll be buying 2 pallets. here in
probably
little
just a
bit.
hot dog.
No, I'm thinking definitely some pork rinds. there's-
yeah.
And that tells you it's a good drink. You're thinking about things that you want to consume with that drink.
Oh, okay.
That's fair. That's fair.
Whatever you say, sir.
So props to the guys out at No Cap Soda Pop. This one, this taste test, I'm afraid, was not as funny as the ones in the past because the drink was pretty good.
We kind of had to we needed a dub.
we
on
need a
this
win.
because-
We really did need a
need
win. That's
we
true.
did need a win.
And because everyone was also going to start to expect that, like, oh, well, they're tasting another trash soda. This one's going to
The fact that
suck.
We're just
And
making fun of everybody's product. And I don't want to be like that. I want to push America forward.
we were, yeah.
These are made in America, so
That's right. That's right.
These
Well, as
guys
long
are
as it's
doing
made in California, barely, but
California.
it's just almost off the western edge, but
They're in there.
snuck it in.
It counts.
still counts.
Snuck it
Yeah.
in by a state.
Still counts. That's right.
All right, so now that we are done with the trial of No Cap Soda Pop, still worried about that name, guys, by the way, but we're going to put something else on trial tonight, and that is the rules of church. So none of us are judges, thankfully, and that's technically not here what we're here to do. And so say the words "on trial" tongue in cheek because we are certainly not the final say on anything like this, but it's piggybacking slightly on our last episode, which or I should say really in the last 2 episodes where we've talked about preference when it came to worship music or the validity of certain songs that are written by artists and whether or not we should knock out an entire artist of songs at our church because we don't believe in the theology of the church they come from or something like that. That's what we've touched on for the last 2 episodes, and so tonight we're going to slide from that into another vein and hopefully have a little bit of back and forth on it. So when I talk about the rules of church, I guess what I mean, and I'll be interested to hear what you guys think that sounds like to you. When I say rules of church, I don't necessarily mean the rules that churches themselves always institute, but what we expect out of church.
The unwritten rules.
The unwritten. That's a good.
That's a good way to put
That's
it.
a good way to
Unwritten
put it.
rules. How about that?
That's a good.
I like
word.
that.
That's a good word.
Change the episode title right there. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
unwritten rules.
That's right. That's right. The unwritten rules of church. Yes. And those a lot of times are ones that we write ourselves and whatnot. So
And a lot of times we don't even know what they are.
Or
Consciously.
everybody doesn't know what they are. It's kind of the same thing with
Consciously.
baseball, right? I mean, they've got all these unwritten rules that guys would get mad about over the years because, some rookie would do something that didn't know they weren't supposed to do. And, borderline benches clearing argument because of something like that.
Yeah, like to follow that, if you flip a bat now on a home run, that's kind of common. Back years ago,
Yeah, it was,
you flipped a
that
bat.
was an
Next time you
unwritten
you're going to get hit in the head
Yeah.
in the major leagues.
Right. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So violent.
Yeah.
Good analogy.
They used to get after
Talk about
it.
people, pitchers like Bob Gibson and people like that, buddy. They had some unwritten rules. If
Nolan
you violated
Ryan,
them,
like one of the most
Ryan did,
well-respected
they
pitchers
didn't
of all
play,
time,
man.
would absolutely just
They would throw at you
For the
in a
first
heartbeat.
Can I mention
really
the big
small
units?
things.
yeah.
Can I mention
Yeah,
the
but
big
he
units?
wasn't anything like Gibson
he-
in that crowd.
He didn't come after guys.
His
like that.
attitude wasn't quite like that. Yeah, he could throw hard, obviously, but anyway.
I'm getting y'all off.
We
track
could go.
on the
I could go. We
baseball.
go all day on Randy Johnson and Nolan Ryan.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
So
Hey, just off topic, but on topic. I was looking for my Dr. Pepper, and I couldn't find it. Mm-hmm. And I just naturally reached for Bus and Berry and was perfectly okay.
man,
a whole new you, man. You're turning over a new
It don't
leaf.
take you long.
What
I'm
an
telling
evening.
you.
Thanks.
by the way,
what?
your Dr. Pepper is behind.
Thanks to the Bus and Berry.
I'm just grateful there's no pork rinds in the house because we'd be in trouble
Yeah,
right now.
yeah. He said they paired with pork rinds, and I think we all shuddered here. In the,
Seriously, no cap.
No cap at all.
How about an unwritten rule of a podcast is no pork rinds?
that's
How about that?
Let's write that rule.
Yeah,
that's
that's forget unwritten.
Yeah.
all right. So the first unwritten rule of church that that I want to go after, because you will probably hear a lot of the same discussion here in the next couple of minutes as things we talked about in the last couple episodes. But let us rehash it for a little bit to kind of use this as a segue. The first unwritten rule of church that we want to quote unquote, very quote unquote, put on trial is that the type of music at church has to be what I expect it to be.
No cap.
Took me a second to process that.
Are you saying
So
are
have we
people
ever
doing
bumped
that?
in? So have you ever bumped into Mr. Worship Leader? Have you ever bumped into that any unwritten rules in that area?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I bet you have. I know you have.
I struggle with answering this question because one of the things that I believe came from my mouth in these prior episodes before was how uniquely personal music is. And so from that perspective, it could be difficult to week after week attend a church where you just absolutely know none of the music and it's not your thing at all and you don't really understand the style or like it or whatever. That being said, how many worship music styles are there out there that you just like? I think if you're around some stuff enough, you really start to, and you should be able to appreciate all of it. I think is what I want to land on, because of there's uniqueness to each style. As long as it's glorifying God and all that sort of thing. There have been places that I've been where I really enjoyed the music. I did not know the songs, and it wasn't my quote unquote style or what I listened to throughout the week. But I think you can still appreciate what's happening. And so it's hard for me to pass like full judgment to say, but I struggle with this one.
So let's jump in. So what if you were asked to lead worship in a church that the style was Southern gospel?
If I was asked to lead worship,
If you were asked to be the worship leader and the style of music in that church was Southern gospel, and that had been there for a while, what would you do?
yeah, I would not really be able to accept that position if that was what was expected of me.
Okay. And for what reasons?
Because I can't harmonize like that.
Okay.
And I don't think, or generally like the way I sing may not fit well there. It would depend. I mean, like, it would depend on how open they are to that, to change.
He doesn't call the equip. He equips the call. Brother. Are you listening to me, brother?
But no, so what I would say, like the hesitation that I would have from there is because generally then you're probably looking at an entire church of people who are coming in and saying like, this is the style of music they're going to, and do they want change or not? And obviously don't come in and just completely flip the table and do the opposite. So I don't know. I would probably not. I would think like there's got to be somebody out there who could do that job better than me. That would be my response.
There's not a chance that he doesn't have some of that Southern gospel DNA in him. There's no way it could have skipped a generation.
Yeah, I'm not saying I couldn't like try to pull some of it off.
Well, I would say as somebody who knows a little bit about Southern gospel, you actually would have a very good lead singer voice.
Yeah, but
you may not be the baritone or the tenor or the bass, but you could be the lead singer.
Yeah,
and you do a good job at it. But the question would be, what's your preference about it, and is it something you'd want to learn? I think probably, maybe.
So where I go, I'm kind of thinking similarly along the lines that you did, Derek, when it comes to the church. Like the music has to be what I want it to be, in that in a I don't know. Chris is pointing at me behind camera. I don't really know what's happening. In a single event, in a church service, I should be able to set aside my preference to worship, right? And I really can do that all the time. Would I expect someone who comes from a like hymns only, no instruments, not even a guitar, that background, to stick it out week after week and I'm sorry to pick names, but I don't mean this as a slight to anyone, but it's just a somewhat well-known church that lots of people wouldn't understand. Would I expect that person to stick it out week after week at Church of the Highlands with that music style? I mean, probably not, right? Because like eventually, if something like that is that drastic, there's probably other things that will eventually lead you maybe to find another church. Like Derek, if you had an offer to be a worship leader for a church that was strictly Southern gospel, and an offer to lead worship at a church that sings songs very similar to the ones that you lead now, which one doesn't make most sense for you and everybody else, to pick? So it's like when we talk about preference, we don't just mean like I literally have to abandon everything that I like. To me, that's not the approach. It's like when I'm presented with things that are different from what I expect, my first thought shouldn't immediately be to put my foot down and say, this isn't what I like.
Yeah.
But I also think, churches themselves have their own kind of style.
Yes.
And it's not, I was once told this is not me making this up. This is not, I heard sometime some guy somewhere, some third hand thing. I was literally, these words hit my ears, was that, we don't care about the preferences of the people within the church. We want the music to reflect the people that we want to walk through the doors, not the people who are walking through the doors. And I disagree with that, because churches do have their own style, and I think that's okay. Because that points back to what you're saying. If I go and walk through the door at somewhere else that is not mine, I should still be able to worship there that Sunday. It might not be where I pick, because a lot of times, as you're saying, a lot of that stuff can be related. churches with certain styles of music might have a style of preaching or something like that that you don't really relate to with either. So a lot of times it's like all kind of interconnected.
Yeah.
Second unwritten rule that we often write about church. There is a specific, and I'm going to elaborate on this. There are specific people that I expect to see when I walk through the door, or I expect to match with the people that I see when I walk through the door. What I mean is, let's take for example, a dad with 2 young kids, about to be 3 young kids, expect to walk into a church and see lots of couples in their mid-30s with young kids, and I have to go to a church like that. Or someone else not married expects to go into a church and they want to decide on which church they go to by what church has the most number of single people there. These are just totally random examples. That's what I mean. Like should I go to a church looking for a certain group of people that I feel like I'm going to connect with? Like, I'm a young adult, so they need to have this massive young adult ministry. Or I have young kids, they need to have this sprawling kids ministry. What are the, I guess, positives and pitfalls of having that type of unwritten rule?
I said one time that I wonder if the largest sin of the church is the sin of homosexuality or the sin of homogeneity. Homogeneity meaning that I has to be like me. I think that is a very dangerous thing to have as a filter, that I can only participate in worship and lead or whatever in a church where everybody else is pretty much like me. And that can go all the way from what you said to family with kids to that we all have similar backgrounds. We have similar taste in music. We all came from similar taste. They have to come from the same denomination I came from, right, perhaps, or that kind of thing. And I think that's an unwritten rule for a lot of people, is I want to go to a church where people are like me. And when I look at the New Testament, I see something different in a lot of ways. It was an ongoing battle initially between Jews and Gentiles who were both believers, so the Jewish people who came in. So we have remember, we have that conflict played out in the New Testament, even between the apostles, So I want to be in a church where everybody's kind of Jewish like me, or I want to be in a church where everybody's Gentile like me. But what Paul did, particularly in his missionary journeys, is said, wait a minute, hold up a minute. You know what I'm saying is we should be able to worship together as Jews and Gentiles, no matter what our religious background has been, when we have as a center of following Jesus. But I don't think a lot of people think church that way. I think they don't like that tension, because there is a tension with it. For example, if you have half of the people or 30% of the people who grew up without any training, and then you have the other half to 70% who grew up Bible believing, vacation Bible school, Sunday school, and stuff like that. I mean, when you try to preach to a group that have that disparity, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, because
Mike Dubose used to say, but it's an opportunity.
It is an opportunity. Yes, thank you very much, and I'm glad you brought up Brother Dubose.
Such a niche reference.
Yeah, I know. That's gonna be tough.
So I think that unwritten rule, and that's an unwritten rule, that if you violate it by saying something about it, people get offended really, really quick. What's wrong with me wanting to go to church with somebody that's more like me? What's wrong with that?
So I'll answer that slightly, in that you would expect to go to church with some people who are like you. However,
yeah,
I made a reference of me being a dad with young kids. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's beneficial for me to also spend some time around guys who aren't just in that role, but who have done that role, who have completed that role. Maybe it's good for somebody who's been in ministry. I'm not talking specifically about you, Dad, but like somebody who's been in ministry for decades and decades and decades, and they just have no fire left, like, you know, just like absolutely nothing left to give. Maybe it would be great to be around the, you know, some 20s and 30s people who are fired up about what God is doing. You know, it's not just because it's not just pulling from the people who are in the same situation as me, but also having people around you who have done it or did what you are doing, what you used to go through, and you know, and you can be of service to those folks as well.
Well, one of the things that happens when you're in this kind of situations you're describing, Eric, and I think you've done a good job of it, is you become apathetic.
Yeah,
I said recently, you know, they used to say I think that constant the same sort of thing leads to apathy. You know, and there's some things that lead to apathy, and one of them would be that is when I don't see somebody who's different from me on fire for Jesus, and all I see is the same people that are just like me. After a while, you can become apathetic about it. But when you hear a brand new Christian that comes in and has a different testimony, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, Jesus works in a lot of different ways, a lot of different systems. That by itself fires me up. You know, and intergenerational is one. I mean, when you can have a child that gets up and says with cerebral palsy on Sunday morning and says, God is my healer. Hello. You know, that's one thing to hear a 30-year-old say that. Another thing to hear a 9-year-old say that, you know, which has happened. So I think when people are not just like me, then it keeps me from being as apathetic. But it is an unwritten rule that somehow they ought to be the same, when in fact I think that might work against us many times if they have to be the same as me, perhaps.
I think it's okay if there's. So maybe I disagree a little bit, but I think it's okay if that's a filter sometimes. But there's much larger boxes that need to be checked off, and if you're searching for a church, there are many more larger boxes that need to be checked off before you start thinking about if you're there for a certain demographic, I think.
yes,
because, you know, I think about someone who's maybe like in their mid 30s, wondering if they're ever going to have a family.
this is a great example.
And I don't expect them to walk into a church full of people retirement age and be like, well, you know, be happy where God put you. Like, maybe, like if you really feel like God's calling you to that church, then yes, but also like not just for the sake of doing something the complete opposite.
Yes.
So I think there's bigger boxes that need to be checked in terms of, you know, obviously what they're teaching is very important. You know, how they're discipling people, all that. So there's just many other things. But I think it's also okay to say, like, if you're unsure about a church and you're like, I'm just not really sure. And also I don't really connect with anyone here. Like it can be another thing. I think where it's problematic is when you walk through the doors and it's the number one thing that you're thinking about.
And that's kind of what I was getting at as well, is when we walk in and it's the first thing, these are the first things that we set out and say, this doesn't it's not happening here. Yeah.
Because there is some like innate desire among people. I mean, it's one of the reasons that cross-cultural churches is really hard. Cross-cultural church is really hard to do, because each side has to make concessions and like everybody just kind of wants it the way that they are. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, but it can be more difficult to do that.
Yeah.
And it's because people have those
Most segregated day of the week.
Yeah.
That'll preach.
Well, I don't know if it'll preach, but it might be true.
Yeah, it might be true.
Okay. Third unwritten rule and I don't really have a great way to phrase this, unfortunately, but it is centered around active participation. So I'm slightly hesitant about how I want to define that. I'm hoping that's just going to come out of the conversation. The thought that came out on paper for me was relating to active participation is I'm so busy during the week. Churches where I come to relax or recharge or whatever. So I can't do ...
Most often, well, often, maybe not most often, but often that shows up in recruiting people. I hear pastors across the board when you're trying to recruit people to take care of children on a Sunday morning or be involved in children's church and so forth. I think that excuse is very often used is I don't come to church because I'm with kids, especially the 30-year-old crowd or some other, or I've done that all my life. I've taken care of kids, and when I come to church, I don't want to do it anymore, that kind of thing. And so I hear churches, I don't care how large they are or how small they are, it is an area that they have one of the most difficult recruiting processes going for that. And I think underlying it is that theme you're describing, Eric, is I come for somebody to take care of my kids, not for me to help take care of somebody else's kids.
Yep. And then at the same time, this one to me was by far the most challenging one on the list because at the same time, like how much can we expect people to walk through? Because kids is a great example, to walk through the door on Sunday mornings and commit to spending an entire service taking care of a bunch of other people's kids and quote unquote missing the rest of the
that was going to be
service.
my thing is like that's one part that there's like an added level to it
Yes.
too, is because it's the one volunteer position on a Sunday morning where you miss the entirety of the service.
Right.
You don't get to be a part of any of it.
Yeah.
I know now at at smaller churches like ours, maybe the kids are in for worship or something like that.
right.
So they see that. But it is like there is an added extra piece to it.
It
in that
is.
You don't get to
Yeah.
be in the service. And so there is some of that where people are like, maybe the declining the position or something like that is a little more selfish, but it's also like that little added level makes it harder to
And multiple services help with that problem you're talking about.
multiple
where they
services,
could go,
folks
for one of the services they could be
true.
engaged in, the other one they could serve. So
That's true.
yeah. But you're right, Derek. It is the one that a lot of people say, well, how am I going to get fed?
I don't even know if it's like a get fed thing.
Well, that's what you hear. That's what words I've heard.
You hear
so,
that. But
Yeah.
This could be like a 2-part miniseries, but one of the things that I like that we're at least talking about it is it's getting me to think about the basic questions and answers of like, why does Chris go to church?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a great discussion because like when you've done something for so long, sometimes you really forget about why I mean, obviously the scripture says don't forsake the assembling yourself together, but obviously that had to mean a whole lot more than what we're talking about for 2 hours on a Sunday morning, and so my wife and I decided if we're going to go to this church, we're going to be a part of this church, Monday through whatever. So,
Yeah. Right.
and I think that's very important, but it's causing me even just sitting here listening to you guys.
Yeah.
It's just raising up sort of questions in my own mind and heart about why do I really get up and go to church on Sunday morning?
Yeah.
And are those the right answers? Are they biblically correct? Like, you know what I mean?
So, some children years ago at Grace and Truth were having a discussion. This was many years ago in the 90s, and they were having a discussion about pastors somehow, and the children's church leader started talking to them and somehow made a comment that the church would give an amount of money, pay me to be pastor. And she said that some of the children started speaking up. Well, that's not fair. Pastor Steve gets paid for going to church. And I love that coming out of the mouth of babes. It's just like to hear their perspective.
Yeah.
And so their thought process is, why does Pastor Steve come to church? He's getting paid,
Right.
So
I think
I'm afraid there's some pastors that's the truth of. I don't know. I don't know if they'd be going to that church if they weren't getting paid to be there.
Because if you can't answer those basic questions, I don't want to cut you off.
Sorry?
I think it's very hard to answer the rest of them. Like you can't say why we go to church or why we need to go to church, and how can you even begin to discuss, well, which one should we go to? Because then you didn't even start off on the right step.
That's right.
You're way
That's
out
right.
of out of cadence.
Yeah. I think this one, because when I said the statement at the start, it was certainly not meant to say this is incorrect all the time, that sort of thing. I'm so glad we went straight to the example with kids ministry, because that's the one that just punches the hardest a lot of times when it comes to volunteers. I think the danger in this attitude is when I start to say, I can't help with anything.
Yeah.
And now there are different levels to helping.
Yes,
If you
absolutely.
are because if you are a mom of a pastor, I'm sorry, a wife of a pastor who is a mom to young kids, who stays with the kids on Sunday mornings while the pastor goes in early to prepare, you are actively participating. It's like
Absolutely.
it seems indirect. It's like, but you are actively participating, and so there's different levels to it. But like, I feel like if I just walk, it's why. And Dad, I think you instilled this in us, and maybe over instilled it. I don't know, which is not a bad thing. But like, why when I walk into church on a Sunday morning, I have trouble walking in and doing nothing.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just walking in for service and walking out as soon as the service is done.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that walks straight out of the service.
Well, not you, right? You've never.
I've heard of
done that
those
before.
types of people.
Chris has a car crank.
And so I'm not saying you have to be to my level to where you want to be doing have something that you're quote unquote contributing every Sunday. I'm not saying that at all.
I wonder if indirectly you're talking about the difference between an active approach to church, an active mindset toward church, and a passive
100%.
Oh,
Yeah.
this
And church
part
is not
two,
passive.
guys. This is part two. You guys are going into part two.
Going to part two. I hear you.
But we set that kind of thing in our mind that my role here, and we don't do it just on church services. We do it other places too. That my role here is passive. My role here is not active.
Yeah.
We do it. Because so many of us, and I'm pointing the finger at myself, that
Actually, that's a thumb, but-
we end up taking passive roles in the kingdom because,
That's right.
oh, you know what? I can't really talk about Jesus at work because I could probably get in trouble for that. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, yeah,
that's
well,
right.
maybe
Yeah.
You can't
I don't
disc
know.
golf.
But
What? Come on, disc golf.
bang.
What?
But it's like that kind of stuff. So we become passive members of the kingdom, where it's like, well, I minister with my smile, and like that kind of thing. It's like, well, we got to be doing a little more than that, right? Right. And so that's kind of where this unwritten rule came from, was exactly how you laid it out, is that this I'm okay to take a passive approach to participating in church.
That's right.
And I think that's one we have to be really careful to protect against writing.
A shout out to your mom about this, because for many years, there's an expectation level that the pastor's wife would be active in certain ways in church, maybe leading a women's Bible study, maybe doing this or maybe doing that. And she never, first of all, I never asked her to, but number two, she said, that's just not something I'm going to do. But the indirect ways that you talked about, she did. She felt like that
Hugely
part of her
important.
responsibility. You guys were important in being a part of church. Being supportive of me and so forth, and so she would never allow. And I would say to people, there is not a definition in the Scripture or a role in the Scripture called pastor's wife that says you're the pastor's wife, therefore you have to be active. So what I think is this activity, whatever it is I'm involved in, needs to be Holy Spirit led, not expectation led by somebody else.
Hey, can we raise it up to preachers' wives right now? Everybody.
Preacher to
Raise up your glass of no cap.
no cap.
Tasty orange. Tangy orange, sorry.
I'm coming out of frame over to you, bruh.
Okay, y'all do clink, clink. There you go. All right, you did it
Absolutely.
for us.
And my wife falls into that category as well because
Well, we're in our 70th minute, and we need to the batteries are probably, but I really would like to keep talking about this. Why we go to church.
I'm game.
Think about it. You guys got my mind going.
All right, so Chris is going to spend the next week thinking about why he goes to church. Thank you so much for listening in to our, as I said earlier, quote unquote, unwritten rules of church on trial. We appreciate you being with us. For Derek and Steve, Chris behind the cameras, my name's Eric. This has been Preacher in the Hat, and we'll see you next time.